Payday 3 is finally out. After years of waiting for a sequel after the beloved Payday 2, it's here. And oh boy, has it been a roller coaster. I wanted to make this video in order to give a review of the game based upon my experience with the game, both surrounding the actual performance of the game and also just the gameplay. Before we get too far into the video, we need to address the elephant in the room, and that is the servers. Ever since the game was officially launched to everyone after the 3 days of early access, the servers have been incredibly unstable. They have been completely down at times. Sometimes some people can get into servers while others can't. Sometimes no one can get in, it seems. It's been quite a situation. And you know, if it had been one day, I think more people would have been okay with it. But it was just so, it was like the scale of this issue has been enormous. It's honestly just really disappointing, and I think it's both disappointing for us as gamers and customers, but it's also really disappointing for the developers of this game. They clearly didn't intend for this to happen. Of course they didn't want this to happen. I think a lot of people are rightfully frustrated. If you haven't noticed, their Steam store page is, I mean, the amount of negative reviews is overwhelming. I think at the moment it's almost 70% negative reviews. I think it's very fair because some people want to make the argument that, oh well, you don't really know the game, so how can you make a review? Well, if you can't play the game, I mean, making a negative review regarding an unplayable product is very fair. I also left a negative review. In my negative review, I didn't just write "fuck these guys" or anything like that. I actually gave some positive things that I've noticed and some negatives, and I'm gonna talk about some of them today. But I did end up making a negative review because how can you back up a product which isn't working? So in my opinion, leaving a negative review is very fair because I don't want to let anyone believe that, oh, the game is great. Like that's kind of deceiving. So now we've talked a bit about that, and another thing that I think is really good to talk about is how overkill the developers have handled the situation so far. They decided to make an hour-long live stream on Monday, and they are going to continue to do that daily for a while, as long as the whole situation is a bit unstable. You know, I think it's a really good idea. It's a good step towards making the community happy again. The issue is that I watched the stream and I thought it was a bit of a nothing burger. I really appreciated the incentive. They clearly wanted to do some damage control and they wanted to get in contact with the community and their player base, but they just didn't really answer any questions. They apologized, which I think is commendable, but they didn't really answer any questions. Whenever someone would write a question in the chat, they just kept saying, "We're evaluating that." And I think it's fair, right? It's not that long ago since this issue appeared, and a lot of people have been asking for offline play, which they should have included from the get-go. But I also understand the counter argument that they made. They really focused on having console players being a part of the whole community, because in Payday 2, obviously, it was a big letdown for consoles. Basically, they ended up having an unfinished product, which they just kind of gave up, as far as I know. So I understand the focus they have on keeping the player base together. But I mean, I'm sure it's possible to have some sort of offline play in order for this sort of thing not having as big as an effect as it did. Because obviously, if we could have played offline, we would have been a bit bummed out about not being able to play with our friends. But at least we could have played and enjoyed the game. So, with that out of the way, I want to talk about the actual game. I want to talk about some of the things that I've noticed and some of the things that I really love. Some of the things that is kind of meh, you know, not really good, not really bad, just something that I'm kind of unsure if I like or not. And in the end, I want to talk about some of the bad things. So let's talk about some of the good things. So first of all, the visuals are great. They are bloody amazing. The game looks great. It's Unreal. And this is Unreal 4, and it's going to be upgraded to Unreal 5 at some point. So it's going to be looking even better and be running even better. But it already looks great, and I feel like it runs pretty well. Even when recording, I have a decent amount of FPS. Only sometimes I have FPS drops when there's a lot of enemies and stuff happening at once. But other than that, it runs really well and it looks great. It's very obvious they have been detail oriented. For instance, if I should give a good example, I noticed when you pick up your phone to do something like hacking or whatever, I just noticed how the screen really looks like a real life mobile phone screen. You have the fingerprints, you have some scratches, and like the surface is this glossy glass kind of thing. It's amazing. The visuals are great. Also talking about a bit of the visuals, the setting and the colors are just on point. They really nailed the whole New York City vibe. It just looks amazing, and it feels really good to run around in. You really get that urban New York City feeling. So they nailed that. To continue a bit, I want to talk about stealth. Stealth is a game mode that, for me, always has been the most interesting thing about Payday. I didn't play the original Payday the Heist. I did play a lot of Payday 2, and I really enjoyed stealthing in that game. And it's very obvious to me that they had a lot of focus on the stealth. They clearly took notice that a lot of people enjoyed stealth quite a lot in the last game, because, oh boy, did they build upon it. It's much more interesting and also challenging. But while they made it a bit more difficult in some areas, they also implemented some things that really makes it a lot less frustrating when you fail. For instance, they introduced these like private areas. So you have a public area where you're allowed to run around without being removed. Then you can go into a private area. If you're in a private area, civilians won't really notice you. And in private areas, if you get spotted by a guard, instead of instantly raising the alarm, they will go over to you and they will follow you out. And that works really well. It's a bit slow at times and a bit frustrating when you get spotted, but it's much less frustrating than having to redo the whole heist. So I think that's a great addition. And also it serves another great mechanic. While you're getting escorted out by a guard, you can actually steal one of the key cards if they have that behind them. And speaking of which, they introduced a lot of new like puzzle mechanics. And I say puzzle because I've always felt that the stealth game mode has these puzzles. You have to hack into a computer, or you have to flip the right switch in the right color or order or something like that. To me, it's like a stealth puzzle. And they build upon that by having multiple different types of key cards. You have the blue key card, which will open a security room where you have the guard watching the security footage. You have a red key card, which usually will be some kind of door leading into a objective that you need to progress the heist. And then they have the QR codes, which is another way to open doors. They have the eye scanners, which is a great way of locking a door, and you have to take a hostage. For instance, in the first heist, you have to find a bank executive in order to open the bank vault. It's just great. They have a lot of moving parts, and I think it's really good. So that's a bit of the stealth. I really think they've made it so much better. Then I want to talk a bit about the loud gameplay, and I enjoyed loud, and I think in Payday 3, loud is really great. The gunplay feels very modern, feels very good. The sounds and the animations and everything just feels really good. One of the things that I've noticed is they removed the weird recoil patterns or mechanics from Payday 2. I never liked that some guns will just spray and have recoil going all over the place. But maybe that's only me, but I feel like it's much more modern and good to have a bit of a randomized recoil system where it generally just goes upwards, and the longer that you pull the trigger, the more recoil you will have. In Payday 3, it feels really good. Feels and looks really good. And on top of that, the movement system feels really good. It's much more snappier than Payday 2. Like Payday 2, it felt like you were floating at times. You could jump in the air and do weird stuff. The movement, I never really liked it in Payday 2, and after playing a game like Payday 3, you really feel the age of Payday 2's movement system. They clearly made it so much better. The enemy AI, I actually think is really good in Payday 3. It's very obvious that it's not perfect, both in stealth and in loud. In stealth, sometimes the AI will walk right past you and won't notice you and stuff like that. But I think that is very fitting for the gameplay. You don't want it to be this insane AI that just instantly spots you and stuff like that. And also in loud, I mean, I kind of like it when the AI in loud is a bit goofy. You know, you can walk behind them and they're not instantly following you around. I think the AI is really good, and it's definitely a lot better than Payday 2 in terms of being more like a perfect AI that is very responsive and stuff like that. But it's not perfect, and I think that's a good thing. Now, speaking of enemies, I really like the special enemies in this game. They have taken some of the well-known and well-beloved special enemies and kind of turned them into something that you recognize, but they have more depth to them. For instance, the Zapper, which is built upon the Taser from Payday 2. It's kind of similar. I mean, it can tase you or zap you, but they added weak points to him. So if you hit the weak point of a Zapper, you will have this electrocution effect that will both electrocute the Zapper himself, but also all of the other enemies in the area. And the same goes for the new special enemy called the Grenader. He also has a weak point, so really great. But yeah, I really enjoy the special enemies with the weak points. Their behavior is different. They have custom voice lines and they sound different from all the other normal SWAT enemies. And they generally just feel unique and as if they have their own purpose. That was some of the good stuff. Now I have a couple of meh things that I want to mention. The first thing is the skill system. The skill system is much more streamlined, but it's not as deep as in Payday 2. And I don't know if it's good or bad. It's I guess it's both. I think it's much more simple. It's much more readable and understandable, but at the same time it's also a bit limiting. If you look back to Payday 2, some people were able to make crazy new ideas for builds, even in the late life cycle of Payday 2. I guess in time we'll see if they add more skill trees or whatever you want to call them in Payday 3, and they will. They already announced one new skill tree that will be coming in the next patch or update. But for now, it's a bit more simple, and that might be good. It might be bad. I don't know. Another thing that is kind of meh is voice acting in some cases. I feel like in general the voice acting is really good for most of the characters. For instance, I feel like Hoxton and Chains and Dallas all have great voice acting. Then you have some of the other characters. I'm not gonna say the voice acting is bad, but it's just sometimes it's a bit cringy. It's a bit it feels like it's trying too hard to be funny. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like it could be better in certain cases. For instance, sometimes Joy will have a pager voice line where she talks about having video game withdrawals or something like that, or really feeling like having a beer and some video games. And I guess it was an attempt to be a bit meta because we're gamers and we're playing, but I don't know. I didn't really find it that funny, but maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm too harsh. So the voice acting, I feel like it's really good in general, but there are some of the voice lines that could have been better. None of the voice actors are bad, I will say. Maybe the direction or the directors or writers for the voice lines could have been better in certain cases, but that's my opinion. I think in general it's pretty good. And the last thing that's kind of meh is Wi-Fi hotspots. So in some of the heists, you will come upon this objective where you have to go to certain Wi-Fi hotspots, and you have to stand still for a certain amount of time to fill up a progress bar. Once you've filled up the progress bar by going to different Wi-Fi hotspots and standing still, you will unlock something. From what I've read, a lot of people think that they wanted to replace the drill from Payday 2, where you basically just had to stand still and just keep a watch that no one would spot or hear the drill. And I guess that is probably better than to have these Wi-Fi hotspots where you're actually being challenged a bit more, because usually the hotspots are in open spaces where you have to keep an eye out if a guard is walking by. But I just, maybe it's nostalgia. The drill was just something special, and I feel like the drill in general is underutilized in this game. Especially for being it's a Payday, it's a fucking Payday game, and they even have a voice line. If you hold middle mouse, you'll have this wheel of voice lines you can say, and one of them is literally piece of shit drill, which is a great reference to Payday 2, but there's not that many heists where you're using a drill. So I feel like it's kind of ridiculous to have a whole voice line on your voice line wheel dedicated to piece of shit drill when there's almost the amount of times you're using a drill is so limited. But that's just me. That's just my opinion. Then, for the last part, I want to talk about some of the bad stuff. Some of the things that I really want to change. The first thing is the UI. I feel like the UI is just it's so obvious that they targeted it towards consoles, because they knew that if you make a UI that works on console, then it would also work on computer, even though the user experience might be less good than if you had a user interface targeted towards PC players. And the result of this decision to make it so console friendly is it's very basic in the way it looks and feels. Sometimes when you're navigating around, it feels a bit weird. You can't always go back, and sometimes when you try to go back, you will end up in the main menu again. The mission select is just it's fucking horrible. You have this weird horizontal scroll bar with all of the heists, and that's really annoying. So that's, a lot of that stuff keeps happening in the UI. A lot of, I guess, unintuitive things happening, and sometimes straight up annoying. Then I think a much bigger issue is there's no lobby selection. Right now, if you want to play with someone, you go to the page I was just talking about with the heist, you select the heist, and then it will start matchmaking you, regardless of if you want to play with others or just play in a private lobby. But that's again the whole I want to play offline issue. But if we look past that, there's no lobby selection, meaning that if you start matchmaking, you will just be put into a lobby, and sometimes there will be no one there, sometimes there will be one person there, and that's kind of annoying. Also because I remember in Payday 2, I thought it was really great that you could join heists that was already started, because when you went in, you could kind of like ask, hey, are you doing loud or are you doing stealth? And speaking of which, they have no fucking chat in the lobby. That's such an oversight. Like, if you have a chat in the lobby, you can pre-plan and coordinate who brings what, and also the most important thing, you can discuss if you want to do it loud or stealth. Right now, when I go into a lobby and I feel like, I want to play loud, 9 out of 10 times people want to play stealth. I can't tell them beforehand, hey, I'm bringing in a loud build, even though I know they try to gap the whole stealth to loud thing. But again, if I go in wanting to play a loud heist, I should be able to tell or ask my lobby, hey, are we doing this loud or stealth? And if 3 people say, no, we're doing it stealth, I'll just leave, find another lobby. So that's a huge bummer with the lobby selection. Then there's gun customization, and I feel like the gun customization, it's really good when you can, like, it is very modern. You see your weapon, you can put on mods, it's good. But it feels like gun mods doesn't really change that much. Obviously the scope changed a lot because it's visual for you, but when you're looking at the stats, they have these bars. It's some of the mods, they barely do anything. And maybe I'm wrong, but it's really hard to read because it's just sliders and not the actual numerical values for what are the stats for the recoil, what are the stats for gun kick, these kind of numbers. They should at least show the numbers. They could also show the bars because that's a good visual indicator if it's becoming much better or much worse when you're changing your gun mods, but they should have the numbers. Then another thing that I don't like is loud heists. Some of the and I don't know, I mentioned before that the loud heist feels good, and they play well. The issue is some of the loud heists are so effing short. For instance, the only heist that is only loud, I don't remember what it's called, but you're on this bridge and you have to escort a SWAT car that you hack. It's a great heist. It's a great heist. Great map, great heist. The idea is great. It reminds me of Hoxton Breakout, where you have to escort the car. It's just a classic Payday heist, but it's just way too short. You can complete it in 10 minutes. The amount of time that you have to escort the car is just, it's not enough time. It's such a short distance. Maybe I've been playing with expert. That could be the issue, but from what I'm seeing, no. I mean, pretty much every time I've played that heist, whether it being on a normal or very hard difficulty or whatever difficulty, it's completed very fast. And I think that's sad. Then there is XP, and the XP for guns and unlocks for guns, it's just so grindy. You gain barely any XP from going loud and shooting your guns, which makes no sense. When I play a match and I kill a lot of enemies and special enemies, I kind of expect to gain a lot of XP for my guns, and it feels kind of bad that it just, even though you're doing a great job in the heist and you're getting a lot of kills, you barely gain 1 level for a gun. Sometimes you have to play 2 or 3 heists to level up a gun, and that's just really grindy, I feel like, especially if you're playing on harder difficulties and stuff. As far as I've seen, the best way to gain XP for your guns is going stealth into that jewelry store heist and just completing that real fast, because you gain a pretty good amount of XP for your gun that way. Even though you don't use your guns, you gain a pretty nice amount of XP, and that's faster than actually going into a loud heist and using your weapons for half an hour or how long it takes to complete the heist. I feel like that's not a very good progression system, but that's my opinion. The last thing that I want to mention is there are a couple of game-breaking bugs, and I've encountered them already. There's this nightclub heist where you have to get a VIP card and authenticate it in order to gain access to a private area, the VIP area. And you have these 2 bouncers who will detect you in the beginning of the heist. So if you go over to them, they will say, hey, you're not allowed here, and they will escort you out. At the moment, sometimes, even though if you have the VIP card and it's authenticated, they will still spot you and kick you out, even though they are supposed to say, oh, you have a VIP card, go right ahead, you can go through. So the heist is bugged, which is really annoying because it's a really, really interesting and challenging stealth heist. I spent like a good couple of hours learning, how do I do this, how do I do that. And when I finally got to the point where I had the VIP card and I had authenticated it, then the heist just bugged out. And then somehow the alarm was raised, and then the servers went down. So, that was a really bad experience. There are also something that might not be a bug, but sometimes the game doesn't really tell you what you're supposed to do. I played the Under the Surface heist, where you are in this art gallery and you have to steal art. And in the first part of the mission or the heist, you're being told that, alright, go to E1, which is the exhibition room where the first painting you have to steal is. You go in there, oh, actually the bar system is up. So you have to go out and disable the bar system. And once that's done, then you can picklock the display case and you can steal the painting. After that, you have to go upstairs, and then it just says, steal the 2 Vicarios paintings, nothing else. And I spent a good like 10 or 15 minutes just trying to figure out, well, why the fuck can't I get the paintings? The bars are up. And I guess I was supposed to realize that I also had to hack and disable the bars upstairs. But the game didn't tell me, and I don't know, maybe I'm an idiot, but I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. So I just spent a lot of time doing nothing, and then eventually the alarm was raised. And I lost the heist. And I feel like that's it. Back in Payday 2, usually you would have Bane who would comment like, oh, I think you should do this. Maybe it's time to do this. Bane would give you hints in order for you to infer what you're supposed to do. I've been speaking for a long time now. And to kind of round it all up and give my opinion, I guess I want to answer the question, can I recommend Payday 3? I guess my answer will be kinda, or maybe. So I think it's a great game when it works. If you're like considering if you should buy it or not, maybe wait a bit until the server issues have been resolved. Whenever the game is really stable and you can play it without worrying that you'll have to wait a couple of days in order to get in, then I think I would recommend it. And another thing I think is very important to say is that they will make the game great. I'm sure of it, because these guys, they are clearly very dedicated to the game. They wanted it to succeed. They were big enough to go on stream and apologize and say, this is just really bad and we should do better. And owning up to it, it really shows a lot of character, and I think they will fix the game and they will listen to the feedback. And I'm sure the game will be really great. If we look back at Payday 2 when that launched, I mean, there were so many issues and missing features and stuff like that, but the game ended up being beloved by so many people. And I am sure that Payday 3 will eventually become this beautiful, beautiful game that people will remember for a long time, just like with Payday 2. Maybe you agree with a lot of the things that I've said today, or maybe you completely disagree. I would love to hear whatever you feel about it. I'm gonna stop rambling because my voice is getting tired. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.